And I'm Dell.
And this is the Black Catch-Up, where we're catching up on iconic black media we missed out on in our more conservative religious childhood.
Alright, so for today's documentary, Black History Month, we watched
Who's Streets?
Who's Streets?
This came out in 2017.
Alright.
And the IMDb for this is an unflinching look at how the police killing of 18-year-old Mike Brown inspired a community to fight back and sparked a global movement.
Alright, so I guess for our documentary format, it's kind of things we
Slightly
learned.
different. So things we learned / important things we want to mention.
Yeah, you want to kick this one off?
Sure. I thought a very interesting thing that kind of like is similar to another national tragedy that I'm sure happens to Black people more than you think is when they were when it was the very beginning where the main like people that we were focusing on in the documentary were saying where they were when Mike Brown got shot. It just reminded me so much of like back in the day when it'd be like, so where were you when 9/11 happened? It's kind of that type of thing. Only it was for this particular tragedy. But I'm sure that Black people have this for like every Black person shooting, or a lot of the Black people shooting. It's like, where were you when you heard that Trayvon Martin got shot, or like when George Floyd happened, or Breonna? Like it kind of reminded me of the whole big conversation, the big tragedy that we would have heard when we were younger. Is where were you when 9/11 happened? This is kind of like an updated, a poor update, but
I think especially like when you're in that like city, you know, like I think for them to like be in the city, like the person's like, I was in my house and like I heard the gunshots outside. You know, I think that
and
was
then
like
some people
very
were like, I was on the bus home and I saw
yeah.
this. Like, so it just reminded me so much of like how people would ask you where you were when 9/11 happened.
Okay. Yeah, the first thing that kind of like stood out to me in this one was I didn't realize they like left Mike Brown's body in the street for that long.
Me neither.
That was like very just shocking to me, and I guess kind of like shows why there was so much outrage among other things. But like just like the disrespect that you have to go through, kind of just leave them there.
The person said that it reminded them of a lynching.
Exactly, and that's kind of what it sounded like too. Like they almost wanted people to see. You know?
Because there's no other reason to not just move a dead body.
And you are the cops, like you know, like you're
you
the
have
people
the
who would,
jurisdiction
you know?
to do it too.
Like that's your thing. Like you're already there, you know. So that like just stood out. It's just very gross to me, you know.
Yeah. Another thing that got me that has been a through line in a lot of these documentaries that we've watched is the idea that things like buildings are more important than Black people. One person said the building burning is worse than a Black person getting shot because the building can service white people while a Black person cannot. And that just really stuck out with me, especially with the protest that happened last summer, where people were very focused on like the outliers who were like looting and stuff like that, and now people were like, and they did this to this building, and it's like, remember that someone got shot, and you can rebuild a building, but once someone's dead, there's nothing else you can do. Like, come on, bigger picture here, guys.
Yeah. One thing I kind of liked that this documentary did was I think in a lot of the older stuff we've watched, there's been like the focus on the main leaders, you know, MLK, Malcolm X, whoever, and I think in some of the stuff we've watched more recently, there's been that transition of like, okay, we have a much more distributed leadership, like you know, people find things out on Twitter, everyone's kind of involved, anyone can be a leader, and I liked how they yes, that is true in today's thing. I think a lot of times people forget that people on the ground in the city at the protest, like leadership still kind of doesn't rise organically.
Yeah, because there are a few, like throughout this, there were a few specific people who like would show up again as like leading the chance of the protest.
And by the end, like the crowd were like chanting their name, like Brittany, or her name was Brittany. Brittany and Alexis, like they were chanting for them to give a speech. You know, so I think like things like that are just very impactful. That like these local leaders do arise in like the modern day civil rights movement. So I think that's just something like I didn't realize as much before watching this.
But like when you think about it, it does. But like when you think about it a little harder, you're like, oh yeah, I guess we don't have like one main like
there's
like,
no like one
MLK.
global like MLK where like everyone's listening to, but like I think it's now almost like everyone's kind of having MLK's thoughts of like, okay, we should be equal, we should be equal. And what you have now is a situation where anyone can kind of get up and say a speech and impact people. And so I just kind of like seeing that in this documentary, like regular people who have like regular jobs, kind of like giving like I don't know, just kind of again like just talking about issues they're passionate about,
And they did a good job of showing them also being regular people too, like them like kissing their kids goodbye as they went off to school, or like doing their hair in the bathroom, and like they're still regular people, but they're just fighting for this important thing. Another thing that got me was the amount of agitation from the police. Not get me as in, oh my god, this was such a shock, because I'm like, I'm not new. I knew this was a thing that happened, but it's just the textbook like gaslighting of of these people who go through something so terrible is just outstanding. Because like I wrote down this analogy, I guess, that I made up, where it's like essentially what they do is they like get all these wasps into a jar, shake that jar, and then like open it up, and they're like, oh my god, these wasps are just like stinging me. But it's like these actions aren't happening in a vacuum. People aren't just protesting to protest. They're like protesting because you guys did XYZ, and they're continuing to protest because you did XYZ, and then you coming at them with like military grade equipment. Like when the one man was showing like, and they have this form of chemical warfare, and like showed the various casings. That was intense, and it made me even more upset when you think about the Capitol riots that happened and how they had the military there so quick for so long. Meanwhile, people actually came to the Capitol building, like a very important building in terms of like democracy, and like no one was there to stop them. And like when we finally got them, it was not as intense as it is for this. Like what the hell? Just I try not to think about that, like the Capitol riots, too much, and just this stark juxtaposition. But like that naturally goes in your head, at least for me.
I guess one other thing I thought was like, I guess good on the documentary for showing was I know they did this specifically in the case of Brittany. They mentioned that she like had to put off school to do this, and I think that's one thing like a lot of people, or at least me personally, I feel like I don't value enough the idea that like for Black people, like this is our life. Like my biggest problem like these Blue Lives Matter is like that's a job. Like I think she mentioned like someone mentioned it like. You punch out, like you're a cop, you punch out. Like yes, you're dealing with problems. You have to, I guess, make these protests peaceful or whatever. But like, worst case scenario, you go home, you punch out. As a Black person, like you deal with these issues 24/7. There's no clocking out. Like things in your life, like to a certain extent, being Black is forced to be that number one priority in your life because of the things you go through because you're Black. And so for them to mention like, she had to put off school just because like Black people were getting shot, and like. I guess looking at it on paper, it's like someone died. You took off, like I guess you didn't know them, but it's that being Blackness that kind of unites all of us, and like I guess it triggers that thing inside you, that like flame that's like, okay, I can't even focus on what I'm doing right now because people who look like me are out here getting killed for no reason, So I think them just like showing that and like really explaining like people like yes, these are regular people, but like. They are literally like putting their lives on hold because this is something that's so important to them, and it should be, And so I just think that was like a very powerful thing. And I just shout out to her for like I guess finishing that school after.
Yeah, she did finish. It was great to hear.
Or I don't know after, but I guess during because we're honestly still in the same time.
Yeah, we're doing the same thing. I guess was that your last point? Okay. Well, last point I'll make is that this just shows that Black people have never been allowed to be human. Like ever, from when we were brought over by the slave trade, we were not human then. We were not allowed to be human when we were slaves. When we were freed from being slaves, we were not allowed to be human. And it just shows even more now because when you think about it and strip away kind of like almost the context of the thing that happened, him being shot. When you think about it and you just like don't put in like the police shot this guy, and that's a weird thing to say, but stay with me here. But if you take that away and you say, hey, so at this memorial that people were having, a bunch of like military showed up. That's a wild and insane thing that would not happen to people and humans. And Black people aren't allowed to be humans. Like they were having a memorial for their fallen man, and police and like high grade military showed up. Like there's no reason for police to be at a memorial service
police officer died.
Yeah, like there's no reason for them to be there.
And I guess going on that, like there's rules to war, and chemical warfare is outlawed on like the global scale.
Yeah.
Like you're not allowed to use like chemical warfare. Yet our own like police force uses it on its citizens. You know?
And like continue with you're not allowed to be human. They can't show human emotion either. Black people aren't allowed to show human emotion. Because when you think about it, someone who looks like you died, and it could have been you if you were, because in all honesty, it could have been anyone, because the police officer didn't really seem to have a reason for shooting him.
Yeah.
It could have been you, and when you show outrage at that, you are demonized and like made to feel like an animal, all that other stuff. But like, as a human, if someone you saw died and it could have been you would be upset about that. Like, why are we not allowed to be upset about that? Why are we not allowed to be like, hey, this is not right? But then it's like, oh my gosh, but didn't you know he might have maybe stolen something?
Yeah. And honestly, what stood out to me more about like the dehumanization is like, at least watching the images, it's the cops to me who came off as non-human.
Yeah.
They all just look so like stone cold, like we're just filling orders.
Cold.
They all kind of look like almost like eager for that action, you know, like
full Gestapo, like
no, yeah, like they put on that suit, but I feel like they almost wanted to, because like they all put on that suit, they all look like they're in like some Call of Duty video game.
Yeah,
you could tell when they gave orders, they were like, I don't know, like it just they had that like little smirk of like, all right, we're gonna smoke them now, you know, and then they all marched together, you know, so like that to me came off as more non-human. It's like, you know, like even like they showed that the one scene of them like talking to that one black cop, and she was like almost gonna cry, and I'm like, any other human would have cried, you know, like human, it's natural for humans to cry. So like, cops are trying to put on this like front of like, all right, we're these stone cold, like we're just the system, you know. So I think weird. That it's kind of that interesting thing, like they're dehumanizing us while they are being.
Yeah, you know? that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So the next question is, when do you wish you'd seen this? When should people see this?
We
might have to cut this question because it's mostly the same every time.
Yeah, no, because I was gonna say, like, honestly, you can just turn on the news any given month. You turn on the news and you'll see pretty much this guy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like now is the time, I guess.
I was slightly more specific, where it was like before or after you go to a protest, just to kind of like this showed. It was like seeing their handbook almost, where it's like cut off communication and like attack and like make sure that they look like the aggressor at all times, really. So, I guess just important things to know.
Yeah.
What were your overall feelings?
I'm not gonna lie, for this one, I thought this one was actually a lot more uplifting than I expected. I think while it did start off with kind of the Mike Brown shooting, that kind of like just depressing anger, you know.
Yeah.
I think it had like a lot of just a lot of good feels from like cities coming together.
Yeah, that was good.
Again, local leaders being supported, like all the hugging that kind of went on. Because again, like these protests were peaceful.
Yeah.
Like for them, like 99% of these protests were 95, whatever percent. Like the vast majority of these protests were peaceful.
It's only like outliers that are.
Yeah, and the only thing is like the problem is we only saw the looting and stuff because that's what the media showed.
Yeah.
But like they were there all day. You know, like we only saw at 10 o'clock once the curfew started and cops started shooting. But like they were there all day, just peacefully holding candles, mourning together. And I think that's a valuable human experience, to be able to mourn together, be able to experience these things together. So yeah, I think the documentary did a good job of kind of focusing on the community aspect.
Yeah.
And like the community leaders, community getting together.
And
so,
even community beyond like just Ferguson.
Yeah.
Showing how it became more global and how they had like the Ferguson protests like weekend and they had people flying in.
Yeah.
Do
So
that.
it was a lot more uplifting than I expected. Especially considering like you see the same thing on news today. So,
It's true.
Like there's been like no actual change, I guess, since then. But I don't know. It's been like kind of. I thought it was a little inspiring, I guess.
I get what you mean. How it was inspiring. But what happens to me every time we see stuff like this is annoyed because it's like Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
You're doing the exact same thing every single time, and it's like, what? And you think, and like craziness is like doing the same thing, expecting different results. And I want to put the craziness on the police and the military because they're the ones doing the same exact thing. Because I feel as though black people who are protesting, we've done it all. We've done violent. We've done peaceful. We've just knelt. We've like hands up, don't shoot. We did some bomb-ass chants with lots of good beats. We did everything
interview ever.
That
Like, he
was
didn't make a
awful.
single facial expression. Like,
Yeah.
all his answers were very, like, I'm trying not to say anything that'll legally get me in trouble.
Yeah, and then George Stephanopoulos is like, people are calling you a murderer. How does that make
He's like,
you
that's
feel?
completely not
But
who
it's
I
like,
am.
that's exactly what you
like,
did.
The question was, it wasn't even a question. It was you murdered this guy in the street, no evidence. People are calling you a racist murderer, and he's like, that's not reflective of my character.
And
Like,
it's
yes,
like,
it is.
that's
Like, I literally,
exactly
all I
what
said was, like, things that you did. Like, all I said was things that you did. That's all I said so far.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's frustrating that man got a flat... I keep saying that word wrong. That man got a platform, but they weren't giving those same interviews to people in Ferguson who were, like, fighting for their lives, essentially. And it just goes to show how black people still can't be human because a black person died unarmed, was shot in cold blood, 10 shots, like, what the fuck? He was killed, and then the first thing they did, or not even first thing, because it took them like 6 days to give him this bullshit response, they were like, so we thought he was like someone who like stole a cigar or something like that. Yeah. Like, why is that the first thing you do? However, the white guy who shot him, he gets to get a platform to kind of like be humanized.
Yeah, like
how is that fair? Why does he get to be more human?
Or whatever.
Why does he get to be more human than the person he shot? Like, what is that about? So that was annoying. And we have one more question because this one got heated on my part mostly, I think. Oh, yeah. But this one got heated, so I said we should have a calm down question. That's just fun.
Oh, yeah.
So I did look up a random question while we were sitting there.
Okay.
So this is not us trying to make this less serious in general, but it's like kind of like a cool down after a workout.
Yeah.
A civil justice.
Back into like a more like peaceful headspace kind of thing.
So the question is, would you rather own a dragon or be a dragon?
Definitely own a dragon. I kind of like being a human for the most part. Like, I don't know, and like I guess having a dragon seems more exciting than being one.
Yeah, I feel
because I can be the guy who has a dragon rather than the guy who like the dragon.
Yeah, especially if you raise that dragon, then you have like a little. I just want a pet so bad. You get to like raise your little dragon pet, and then
I'd love to have the baby dragon. Have a baby dragon, and then like when they're big, like I don't know, go on a walk without a leash, and
then you just have a dragon who's
stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, that's my answer too. I'd rather own a dragon than be a dragon. I do like being a person, and I feel as though having a dragon's cool. But if I were a dragon, I wouldn't understand that it's cool.
Yeah, and I want to ride a dragon more so than I want to fly as a dragon.
Yeah, I don't need to fly.
You know, I'd like to just get on top of a dragon, have him take you through the air, and then have to actually maneuver that. You know,
that'd be so cool. And with that,
with that, YouTube housekeeping, like, comment, subscribe.
Ring the bell for notifications. If you have any suggestions for us, you can leave them in the comments down below. We do movies on Tuesdays and Fridays, and on Sundays we do TV shows and music. All of our socials will be linked in the description down below.